Welcome back to Think Design Work Smart. I'm Alex Bolboaca and I'm coming at you from the Mozaic Works studios. And what I have for you today is, given that we are recording this in advance, but we plan to publish it towards the end of the year 2024. It's been a year full of learnings. And so we thought about sharing some of the things we learned this year. And to do that, I'm once again joined by Adi. Hi.
Hello, everyone.
So Adi has been very busy, and that's why you haven't seen him in a while. What have you been up to?
Well, a lot of clients, a lot of trainings, workshops, digital transformations, some automated testing, some programming. A various amount of things.
Yeah, so I hope everybody's glad to see you. The channel has grown since you've last been, so we have quite an interesting community, I think, and more active, which is great to see. But let's just jump into the topic. So we have a bunch of things that we learn, 9, and I will start with the first one. Practice makes perfect. This is something that I knew, but this year I've seen it in practice more and more. So this year, 2 things happened. One is that I wrote yet another book. And the second one is that I've been invited to do 2 keynotes, one of them with you, Adi.
Mm-hmm.
And for both of them, I noticed how important is practice. When I wrote my first book, I really needed, the specialty. I'm kind of exaggerating right now, but it's, it's kind of to make a point. The perfect music, the perfect tea, the perfect time in the day, the perfect mood, But after writing so much for this book, it was like, okay, I have something to do. I have 15 minutes. Let's write a couple of ideas. And so this is one thing that I like to stress. When you practice something for long enough time and well enough, it turns out that you don't feel like it's that difficult anymore. You don't need all the prerequisites that you needed initially. And the same thing happened with the keynotes. One of the reasons I think that it was quite easy for me to build the keynotes was that I'm doing all these videos, so I'm used to explaining things, and that's a very good practice. Ideas come. I got better at explaining ideas for an audience, so then translating this into a physical audience that you can see it was not that difficult anymore. This used to be quite hard. But this applies to a lot of other things. Recording has gotten easier for me. When I first started, there are a lot of things that you need to do, like I need to switch scenes and do all kind of stuff here. But it's gotten easier. And right now what I'm working on is DevOps. I think that's one area where we need to invest a little bit more in Mozaic Works, a bit more infrastructure, and I'm looking at various ways of doing that. And yeah. Any comments?
Yes, I remembered what you were saying about the book, that there's a quote I really like from Stephen King, which is one of the most prolific authors, I think, book authors. And he used to say, amateurs sit and wait for inspiration. The rest of us just get up and go to work.
Yeah. And
so work. It's a lot of work when you write a book. It's not about waiting for inspiration.
Yeah. And
the time of day and so on.
And look, sometimes you wish you had more time because some ideas would deserve more, but we'll talk about this later on. But after all, you have a deadline. You need to be there. So, you need to work. And Stephen King is actually a really interesting example because his work schedule was whatever he was doing. He said, I need to write, I think it was 8 good pages every day.
Hmm. Which is a lot. If you don't know, that's a lot.
Yeah. And I mean good pages. And good
Mhm.
pages for Stephen King is amazing. By the way, I've been on a reading streak of Stephen King, and I really love his work. I don't like horror that much, but his work is incredible. All right. So, well, what about you? Your first one. Don't push it more than it should. Change management.
My first topic is about this. When you go to big organizations, you are not used to the tempo, the rhythm of what's going on there. Typically, you see and you know things could happen 10 times faster, 50 times faster, 2 times faster, whatever. But every organization has its rhythm in changing from where they are to where they want to be. And I always have this urge to get a bit more, make them work a bit better, and sometimes, quite often, this is detrimental. So we should just understand the pace of the organization and work with that pace. If you push it too much, then the opposite happens. In fact, the change or whatever you're trying to accomplish happens not that fast, or you need to have other types of activities. Maybe you start having fights, or people start fighting about topics and so on, which is not productive. So when changing things, even if it's extremely frustrating, hang in there, observe the pace of the organization, and go with it, go with the flow.
And actually, this relates with the one that was my fourth one, but I will just jump into it, which is ideas need to cook. I use this metaphor mostly in a software design, software architecture context, where I've noticed that there are certain ideas that you introduce in the code, but it takes some time until they become stable and they can be kind of replicated, reproduced, and until they become dependable, actually, and you can produce software that uses those ideas. And I think it's because there's a rhythm to learning, and expressing things in software design, in software architecture, is a lot about things that you don't know initially, but you need to learn in time, like various concepts, typically domain concepts, but not only. Sometimes it's things that are quite technical in nature. And many people refer to this as gardening, but I don't like gardening. I know you do, but I don't. So because of this, I thought, okay, what's the closest metaphor? And I think cooking is the good metaphor for this. It's you don't want to serve raw plates, right? When you cook something, it has to boil for a specific amount of time. It has to fry for a specific amount of time. You cannot just say, okay, we need it faster, so let's take the raw meat and put it there and whatever, we'll call it a steak. It doesn't work like that. But my feeling is that this is what we are often doing in software development. It's like we are taking very raw things, throw them there and hope that we'll get a nice dish. And it doesn't actually work like that. And I think it relates with change management because in a way that's also change. I mean, change management is about learning new practices, embodying new practices in an organization, whereas this is more about, consciously, or actually starting to unlearn, getting to the point where you can use some concepts in a way that becomes natural without you having to explain them or again and again. Right.
I think it's really complementary to gardening, because the gardening metaphor, at least in my view, is about knowing how to grow things. So it's not necessarily about the feedback. It's just about you understanding how you need to grow certain things. There, in the pace of nature, you cannot make it faster or slower. That's the pace. But you need to know where to push, where to, I don't know, trim some branches or something like that, or how to put enough enough ingredients, or when to put the seeds and so on. So I think it's something else, and it's very interesting and very, very useful. I mean, gardening is about pruning, but this is more about change. And they're complementary, in my view.
Yeah, so one thing I think happens in software design is we start with an incomplete view of the problem, right? Because you always do. It's very rare that you actually have a complete view of the problem. So you start with an incomplete view of the problem and you try to express what you understand. But then it turns out that splits into smaller things and they kind of repeat throughout the code. And then at some point you realize that there's some unifying factor. And that's when you say, okay, so actually these 10 things are one thing and we should group them together and so on. So yeah, there are some interesting phenomena here. But let's skip to your second one, which is how to shoot yourself in the foot with traditional budgeting. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, so again, one of our customers, it's really interesting that because if you want to, every organization can be run by people who do budgets, finance, okay? Let's say finance people. And if you do only that, everything you'll do is become extremely efficient in spending. And then you have counter effects, like people leave, and then you don't have so much profit anymore, or you buy the poorest solution or the poorest tool because it was cheapest, and then guess what? You need a lot of maintenance, so you need to work more. Or what another thing that happened that was really interesting, one might say even funny, is that they said you aren't allowed to use more than this percent of budget for maintenance. So everybody's reporting that maintenance maximum. Of course, they're working a lot more. So gaming the system because someone from, I don't know, budgeting, financial said that's the amount of budget you need to put there. And as a side effect, you don't know how much time or capacity you have for building new initiatives or new features, because everybody can only report that percent of work for maintenance, but in fact they work double. And they cannot say why they don't have time to work on new initiatives or new features, because they're not allowed to. So this is extremely problematic, and you shoot yourself in the foot, and you make this forecasts of new features, because you have that capacity. I don't know, let's say 60-70% of the team's time is just on new features, but in fact you have 20%. So everybody's committing on those percent, but then nothing gets done because you aren't allowed to say that you work more on maintenance. So it's really, really shooting yourself in the foot with traditional budgeting.
So in case people who are watching this actually can do something about it, which I doubt, but let's assume that, what would be an alternate way of doing things that avoids these Or
measure first how much maintenance you have, improve in sense of make some, create some initiatives of implement some stuff so that you have less maintenance time, so that you really have less maintenance. But this comes with an investment. So probably there are things that you work on, manual work that you need to work, and if you do some automation, some automatic flows, I don't know, you fix some tools, you fix some bugs, you won't have that much time. So focus first on removing or minimizing that maintenance time, and then see how much it really is. And if it's really too much, again, decide what you need to do to really, maybe you need to change some tools, maybe people need to learn some things, you need to change procedures, you need to, I don't know, do other software or whatever. You need to see what you need to do in order to really be at that limit of time you want to spend, or money you want to spend for maintenance. So measure first, improve, and then start putting it as a target. Okay, don't put it like that. Write it from the top of your pen.
Yeah. So we have a video about removing bugs and preventing bugs. So you should watch that one first. And I don't think I did anything about theory of constraints, but that's what applies here. I don't actually remember. I realized that we have about 350 videos right now. So
yeah, it's hard to remember everyone. But of course, theory of constraints applies here, but not from the point of view of budgeting. If you want to start financial wise, it's just, I don't know, they would say it's not our job.
Yeah.
To apply theory of constraints. We just want to make sure that the money is spent wisely.
Yeah, that's the main problem, that these two parts of the organization act very differently and very disconnected in a way, each with their own interests, and it's hard to make them work together.
And any top bottom constraint like this will be gamed.
Yeah, absolutely. Always. All right, so let's move to the third one, which I'm going to talk briefly about this one because I've done a whole video, but it's more to point you to this video, which was also very appreciated in our community, how to deal with the unknown. Now, the context of this was that this was immediately after it was before the second tour of presidential elections in Romania, which later got cancelled. So it was a time of very high unknown, and it made me remember about things that I've learned about how to deal with the unknown and things that I've applied with teams and so on. And basically, I focused on 4 things. First, understand what are the things that you control, because you need to ground yourself into something. When you don't know what's going on around you, just figure out what is stable, and that's first. Find your area of control. Second is focus on now, and I suggested one way to do this, which is adapted from trauma counseling, which is to focus on the things that you hear, see, feel, sense right now, and name 3 things, because this grounds your brain into now. And then strategize based on what you know now and not on what you wish would be. That's a very important thing, because many people there's actually a phenomenon of getting stuck into a kind of wishful thinking, what you imagined would be and so on. You need to forget everything you wanted to be, and then just focus on what you know, what makes sense now. And then this allows you to formulate a plan and then you need to adapt pretty often because when you deal with unknowns, well, it depends how fast things change. But when you deal with unknowns, it's possible that you will need to adjust every day or something like this to adjust your plans. And I think this was, apparently this was very useful for people for multiple reasons, I imagine. There were also a lot of software developers who lost their jobs these years. So this helps as well. And this is the example that I focused the video on. But it can, it applies multiple contexts. And the rest is a little bit more explained in this video that I will refer to at the end here. Any comments on this, Adi? Or?
No.
Okay.
It sounds really interesting and fully agree.
So then let's go to your third one, I think. People are used to processes, not to discovering them.
Yeah, so there's this thing that some group of people said in the Agile Manifesto that we want to discover processes. But guess what? When you go to big organizations or even smaller organizations, people would prefer having a process rather than discovering it. Discovering a process is difficult. It's not nice. It's not pleasant. It's an activity that assumes that you will make mistakes and you need to learn from them. You will do things that you maybe are extremely sure that work, and then after a while you'll see, no, it was wrong. So experimenting is essential to discovering a process. But not a lot of people do experimentation or want to do or know how to do it. So it probably is also about education. It's also about how schools work and our society. But this is what I saw, that people would prefer to have a process rather than discovering it, or would prefer someone to discover the process for them.
Yeah.
Than them discovering themselves.
So one thing I'm thinking here is, and let me ask you this as a question. Do you think that engineers should also discover some processes?
Well, it depends on the engineers. I mean, there are engineers that do the same thing all over again each day, and there are engineers who experiment things, try new things, want to learn things. In the second case, I would say yes.
Because my feeling was that part of engineering is also to adapt your process.
Yeah, it is, but only it's a feedback, right? It's a feedback loop, the traditional feedback loop. But I don't think many engineers do that. Okay, many engineers just work in an office and they do more or less the same thing. And this doesn't mean that you're learning or adapting your processes. It just means that you get stuck in your way. Even if it's good or bad, you just get stuck in your way.
All right. So it's kind of the same in all disciplines. Now, if you are an engineer or if you know an engineer that does work in and keeps improving their process, let us know. We are interested in having a chat with such people. One thing I'd like to mention here is I've noticed, it's a bit tangential, but I think it's interesting. I've noticed in the past year, and a little bit early, but mostly in the past year, more and more teams start saying, we are not doing sprints anymore. We have decided to pick a feature and focus on it, and however it takes, which is actually extreme programming, but they don't realize it's extreme programming. They are just rediscovering extreme programming. And this is, to me, it's very interesting. I hope more teams do that, because extreme programming is, I believe, the better way of dealing with software development.
I think this works really well without condition. One really important condition: the fact that you should be able to stop at some moment and say it's good enough. Let's go on with the next feature. Otherwise, if you have a lot of people in the team wanting to make the perfect feature,
Yeah.
you'll just end up having a lot of investment for not a lot of return.
Yeah, I think the sprints are, they are still iterations, but they are between 1 week and 6 weeks, something like that.
Yeah. There are business iterations. You still need to know when to stop. I see this this potential issue when you start on a feature that you need to know when to stop.
Right. Yeah. So I kind of agree that people tend to like having a process.
It's called, it's easier. It's simpler.
Yeah. It's true. On one hand, I think it's important to focus people on where they bring the most value. And I think, to me, a lot of Agile is about this, actually. It's about finding the right place. The thing is not necessarily to try and change everything and everybody to be involved in every kind of area, but more like, if some people are more interested in processes, they can help with that improvement. If some people are more interested in writing better code, more power to them. If some people are interested in automated tests or infrastructure, so on. So there are various things that you put together.
This is the basically T-shape individuals. Making people want to learn what they want to learn, or empowering them to learn and use what they anyway would like to learn. And I think this is really useful.
Yeah. And there's also a matter of how much you can actually improve based on your process
Yes.
Because different products need different levels, different organizations need different levels. It's not obvious to me that if you just keep adjusting your process, you'll get better and better in time.
No, you start having at one moment it would be good enough, or you have less time, less intervals when you need to adjust it. You just don't need to look at it every 2 weeks. You might look at it every 2 months or every 6 months or something like that. There'll still be improvements, but yeah, probably not that often.
Yeah. But still, I would advise people to learn how to do empirical experiments and try them out. These are always useful, personally and in a team. Okay. Let's go to, so I did 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I have a fifth. Digital learning experiences. So let me tell you a story. There's a series of games that started with Dark Souls. And these are very difficult games. These are games that are well-known, video games, well-known for their difficulty to the point that, yeah, I mean, a lot of people have heard about them. And when they first appeared, they were very difficult. People took them over. They started getting better and better. And then more and more games appeared in this series. So now you have Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, Bloodborne, Sekiro, Elden Ring, I think. Yeah, you have 6 of them. And this is relevant to the story. So once you first of all, many people were struggling. Then some people finished the game. Then some people said, okay, so how about I do a no death run of the game? And they started practicing and practicing until they got a no death run. Then the next level would be, how do I do a no touch run, no hit run, actually. So do a run without being hit by any enemy at all. That's, if you know anything about these games, it's incredible that anybody achieved this. I mean, you have to learn so much about these games that it's impressive. But then the thing that made me really reconsider what's going on in this area is there's one guy who played all 6 games in a no-hit run. And if he got hit, then he restarted the whole series. So if he was at the 5th game, got hit, okay, restart from the first game. And this is, I won't comment on the dedication that's required to do this, but it's impressive. So what made me think is, one thing that I've seen developers struggle with is, we tell developers for a long time now, look, you can learn a lot of skills. You can learn test-driven development, refactoring, dealing with legacy code. You just need to practice. You just need deliberate practice. And this is actually a form of practice. Right? What you have in these games is really a form of practice. Only these games are doing some specific things to create and maintain your motivation to do this stuff, which is, again, very interesting. So because of this, I think there's an opportunity for what we call digital learning experiences. Games that would allow you to practice certain things so that by the end you get much better in a specific skill. And this is something that we've been exploring for a year or so. It's still a very difficult topic. It's still, there's not a lot of literature on it. There are not a lot of games that focus on these kind of things. And okay, maybe it will be difficult to call them games for managers, but we'll call them, digital learning experiences. It's much better. But the basic idea is, I think there's a chance here to create experiences where you go in, you practice some things, and you get more and more, higher and higher difficulty topics. And nothing is easy, because that's one of the ideas in Dark Souls. But you feel like you're improving, and that would be really cool. Now we are still working on that, and I don't know how long it will take us, but it's a very intriguing idea.
To me, it sounds like the code retreat, right? You delete the code and you start all over.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it has some...
With these games.
Yeah, and maybe there is something here, because So I think the reason they caught on is that... So in games like Dark Souls, you play in a specific area. And if you die, you lose your souls, which are basically the in-game currency, which you use to buy experience and items and everything. And you need to recover, but whenever you respawn, all the enemies respawn. So you need to fight them again until you get to that point, get your experience back, and then move forward until you get to the next save point, where you can save and respawn later on in the last point. So on. So in a way, this is like a code retreat. You preserve your personal experience, but you delete what got you there. right? Only it will be more like a continuous code retreat. So let's say you start with a simpler
Yeah.
task, but then you kind of build on top of it little by little. I have the tendency
Yeah.
to
Interesting.
overcomplicate these things when I try to implement them. So if any viewers are interested in these ideas, let me know, and I could use some advice or some ideas.
Simple is good, but simple is very difficult.
Yeah. And I noticed that I tend to overcomplicate things sometimes. It's one of my challenges. All right. And this takes us to your last one, product
My
initiative
last one, yeah.
discovery. Yeah.
So I learned from this, especially during the pandemic and after the pandemic, people started working and continue working remote, which I think is great and really good idea. But there are some situations where you can have a lot of good impact and progress. And I knew about this one, but in a way I forgot it. And I think I've read again in one of, I think in User Story Mapping book by Mike Cohen, that he recommends this type of workshop where you do this discovery, the refinement, and so on, where everybody's present. And this is extremely powerful. If you want to have a new feature, a new product, if you want to have it well structured from the beginning with a good idea as much as you can at that moment, have a workshop with everyone in a room. Address it, maybe have one day of it. So it's not a lot. If it will take you months of implementing it, okay, maybe in iterations, maybe you'll have more iterations. But if it takes you months on that, especially if it's a complex topic, even more if you need people of different skill sets, specializations, different experts, gather everybody in the room there, make sure they can stay for half a day or so, and have this workshop. It will bring so much benefit for the overall experience of implementing that feature, and for the end result, and for the customer experience. So it's a really good investment of time and money, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. So these make a lot of sense, along with things like, so what's it called, the prototyping that's done. So you can do prototyping for a new idea.
Spiking?
No, it's more in the discovery side.
Okay.
Where you actually do a prototype and you test it with potential users before you decide to implement it.
Of course.
Yeah.
This might be a result of this type of workshop, that you need to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you should do this from the beginning, and it's really, really powerful. And in the age of working remote, it's not something people do that much, and it's good to do it. I recommend everybody.
So, what did you see was different or better in a physical context?
Well, people are engaged, are present, listen what's going on, complement each other, add details, ask really important questions, or add information that can shift the potential solutions or the potential direction of the solution. And also the fact that they are all there together, they start having a common understanding of what they want to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
from all the points of view as much as you can. So, it can be product, business, it can be commercial, it can be a technical, no matter which point of view, even if it's architecture, security, performance, scalability, and they all talk about these topics, and they are all important for this feature. And this way, they, after those few hours, they have this common understanding, which, okay, you will write some of them in the user stories, in the user story map, in whatever you want to write, or in the documentation, in the analysis, in whatever, in your contract tests and your automated tests and your specs by example, but you won't have everything there written.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important because you start having the same language, or you communicate a lot better after that in plannings, dailies, demos, and so on. So communication becomes easier, and it gets everything you do is faster.
Yeah. You start cooking ideas, basically.
Yeah. But you start cooking them in the same direction with the same tools, not someone's doing this, the other one is doing that, and you have this path that you agreed on, and you have better progress.
Was it controversial in the organization to set up such a...
No, but it's something that they're not used to. No, that's the only thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the business people need to tell us what to do, and then we'll start grinding on it until we get something done.
Yeah. I know a lot of sentiment has been that people, particularly from developers, that it's good enough to work remote. We love working remote. It's and so on.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of pushback against going back to the office. But
I understand if it's useless, but this is useful, and I think everybody understood the value of this and came happily and worked happily with this.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, that for specific things, it's much more valuable and you can solve things much faster if you are together in the same room.
Mm-hmm.
And these are some of them. And by the way, if you are interested, we have learning programs on impact mapping, user story mapping, agile product management, and so on. So a lot of, which is mostly about discovery. So, okay. And I think I have one last one, which is cybersecurity. This is one domain where I've learned a lot this year. For a number of reasons. I already had a basis in cybersecurity. I was interested in a lot of things, but we started getting more requests and I got updated. Well, I mean, I knew things from the developer, architecture, design perspective, how to do a thread model and so on. But I wanted to learn more about the whole ecosystem and how things are happening. And here, my biggest surprise, you can call it a shock. It was almost shocking to learn. There are actually underground organizations that provide ransomware as a service. So, yeah.
Good business.
So you imagine, I think one of the things is people know hackers mostly from Hollywood movies. And the Hollywood movies is basically people who are typing really fast and saying things like, I'm
With a
gonna
black screen.
do that, and I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna go around the firewalls. Look, there's another firewall. I'm gonna, so on. But he's pushing back. He's now hacking me. Oh, so it's very exciting.
Mm.
Cybersecurity is not at all like that. Most hackers. So, okay, there are some very smart people who look at and find vulnerabilities, figure out the exploits, write tools, and so on. But 80% of hacking today, and I'm going to exclude the state entities, okay, because that's a completely different story. Those are people who have a mission, they are hired, it's a completely different thing. But if we exclude those, 80% of the rest of people have no idea about the technical aspects, or very little idea about technical aspects. Because the only thing you need to do is to download some tools, run some scans, and then you figure out that, oh, look, there's a potential exploit there, and you load the exploit, the program that would do the exploit. It tells you if it succeeded or not, and so on. And this is already, let's say, the more sophisticated hacking, because you have to know a little bit of tools. But the least sophisticated hacking that happens today goes like this. You go to an organization, you pay them in Bitcoin, they give you or in cryptocurrency, I guess mostly Bitcoins, but possibly other things. They give you, and you can rent exploit software, and you use it, and in case you have some issues with it, you have a 24/7 call center, which is incredible. So people actually are answering the phone and telling you and helping you how to hack organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And this works extremely well for ransomware, because a lot of organizations are not prepared for ransomware. You've seen a lot of hospitals, a lot of healthcare going down because of this. There was 1 week in London where all of the hospitals were down because of a ransomware attack on a provider. So, and you can do all this, by paying an organization to basically give you the tools, give you support, you run the exploit, and then you get the data, you encrypt the data, and you give the organization the choice between paying you for the decryption code, or you take the data and you sell it on the dark web. And that's...
I have only one question. If they don't respect the SLA for call center, is there a special tribunal for that? Is there a parallel legal system of ransomware? They have judges?
the Continental. I don't know if you saw John Wick, but so in John Wick, there's a whole underground world that has very specific rules, and they are grounded in a hotel that's called Continental, and that's around the world. And it's basically a safe area. So it's the area where nobody can kill anybody else from this organization, and they get their supplies and all that. But it's also kind of the judges, and if you do something bad, they will follow.
So that's the way, I guess. That's the next thing.
Could be. Yeah, I never thought about that, but so yeah, that's where we are with cybersecurity. It's not as difficult to do. You don't have to be extremely sophisticated to do these things. And honestly, it's scary, because I think in Bucharest, we had one mayorship, right, that went down. One website.
Yeah.
From one of the sectors. There were a few hospitals. Now in Romania, they don't say a lot. You have to kind of follow the trails, but there were a couple of hospitals. But in London, it was all the hospitals for like a week were blocked because one of their providers was attacked with ransomware. And this is, let's say, the least sophisticated way to attack. Now imagine if you're doing some of the more sophisticated ones. So honestly, I encourage every software
Yeah.
developer to learn a little bit more about cybersecurity. We also have a responsibility here to make sure, well, or at least to consider this perspective that the code that we write can also be exploited, and to try to avoid this a little bit. Of course, there are security experts who should do their job. There's a whole lot of state and governments who need to do their job. There's a lot of, it's much more complex than just developers, but it's also our responsibility to kind of get a little bit. One participant to our secure coding learning program told me that by the end he got paranoia plus plus. And that's kind of what I want. You know?
Yeah, that's what happens. Yeah.
So I want you software developers, I'd like you to increase your level of paranoia just slightly. Don't go to the levels of security experts, because they are, honestly, they are very high.
Yeah.
That's their job. We want to build things. We don't want to destroy things. So, but we need to be a little bit more paranoid about the code that we write.
For sure.
And one of the things that's scary to me in software development is supply chain attacks. So, and we actually did a whole video on that. So a lot of organizations take code. Let's say you start a new project. I will give here the example of NPM, because NPM to me is like, it's the worst offender here. When you take NPM, it downloads a lot of packages. And it's always a question in my mind, how many of those are actually screened for security? How many of those have been protected against replacement? Right? Because an actor who wants to do something bad, they can take a package or create a package with the same name, with one that exists, have the same code, but add something a little bit more, and they get access to your network or resources or passwords or whatever.
Yeah.
And downloading all these things and then using them in your code, it's becoming more and more risky nowadays. Supply chain attacks are really difficult to prevent. And then you have these packages that are packed into other packages, that are packed into Docker images, that are packed into, so it gets, okay, we always had this complexity in software development, but now we are realizing how much of it can be exploited. It's not great. So yeah.
So be careful, and of course, I think people aren't careful enough with these situations.
Yeah. Well, chances are, if you work in a large organization, you have whole departments taking care of this, and hopefully.
But even then, it's not enough sometimes. You need to know when to ask them, and also what to discuss with them, even if you have departments.
Yeah, so all right, so this concludes our list of 9 things that we've learned. Now we haven't prepared for this, but is there something that you look forward in 2025?
Oh yeah, of course, many things. Learning wise, I would say I'd like to get more of a grip on DevOps, but DevOps on really getting my fingers on some things I didn't put my fingers on yet. So I'd like to do that. or more. And from all aspects, even if it's deployment, packaging, security, performance, scalability, everything, monitoring, and all these aspects, which are, I think, really important for how we deal with today's software, and integrate with other things that I know, testing, test automation, programming, and so on, and seeing how this works. So this would be a thing I'd like to feel better by getting my hands dirty on next year. And more than that, I have some books to read that I haven't in a while. I have a long list, but you can read as much as you can. And there are very various books. It can be about coaching, about psychology, maybe some technical book on how to handle deployment pipelines, or this is various variety of books like this that I'd like to read. And yeah, who knows what happens after that.
Yeah, so I'm also looking forward to, on one hand, the infrastructure. There's something that I've kept learning more and more about, and now we are in the point of adding some more infrastructure, and I'm actually looking at creating a kind of mini cloud environment using Raspberry Pis, which is gonna be quite cool. I already started, and it's very interesting what you can do with a Raspberry Pi today. You can deploy Docker containers. There are a lot of applications that will actually work really well on a Raspberry Pi, particularly for small numbers of users. I mean, if you have applications for internal use that are for maybe 10, 20, 50 users, it's something that you can run quite easily on 1-2 Raspberry Pis. It's with some add-ons if you need to. Another thing I didn't know is that you can actually add a neural processor to Raspberry Pi, so you can have AI processing with an extension. So to me, I kind of like these small, neat solutions, but I also want them to work as automatically as possible, right? To kind of maintain themselves. And these are one interesting thing about Raspberry Pi, unlike normal computers, is that it will restart automatically if the power goes down. Because it works a lot like a phone, basically. If it's plugged in, it will start. It's how it works. And so this solves one problem. And another thing that's very interesting is that you can have a natively read-only file system on it if you want to, which can protect against a variety of security issues. Again, very interesting. So I'm learning about this and how to have some infrastructure that we include in our learning platform, so that, for example, you'd be able to write code and get feedback and kind of have also maybe some of these digital learning experiences that I was talking about, have them in the learning platform that we offer. That would be really cool, I think. And the second thing is we have some requests around microservices and domain-driven design. And I think it's really great. I can't wait to discuss these topics with people who want to learn them, who are starting, and who can learn from the mistakes of the industry until now. Okay. So I think that's it from us. Anything you'd like to tell our audience before we close?
Oh, it was I don't know, interesting, maybe good, maybe bad year. I don't know. For me, it was an interesting and year full of experiences, and I wish for everyone next year to have a great 2025, and may hopefully see more of these videos that we make here on this channel.
Yeah. So thank you, Adi, for joining.
Thank you as well.
And for all of you, if you found anything interesting, if you learned anything new, let us know in the comments. We love comments. We love to have these conversations, also including you. As I mentioned, I'm thinking about doing some streams next year. Let me know about this idea as well. What do you think? What should these streams be about? Thinking something around development, architecture, software design. So let us know in the comments. This has been all from us. Thank you kindly for the view. Until next time, remember to think, design, and work smart. See you next Saturday.